And we have the pleasure of interviewing one of our 2017 honorees, Mr. Richard Finley from the great city and state of Birmingham, Alabama. Mr. Finley, welcome.
Well, good morning. Thank you.
And tell us, you've been involved in Republican politics in Alabama for decades and decades. Tell me why it's important for a group like Black Americans for a Better Future to exist, and how do you feel about receiving their Trailblazer Award for 2017?
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to receive the award, and the work of a group like this, I think, allows us to tell our story, gives us a more level playing field. For all too often, the Black community has been consumed with one story, one direction, and it's been a very effective job of blotting out the voices of Black conservatives or Black Republicans, if you will. And so I'm just excited and honored and pleased to be here, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing because our story needs to be told.
Yes, last night we had a panel discussion with your fellow honorees, and it was amazing to hear the feedback from the audience because they've never seen this collection of honorees and Black Republicans, but who are also deeply involved in their local communities. And this is the side of Black Republicans that the media never covers, as far as seeing Blacks who are constantly engaged in the community, who are not walking around with horns coming out of their heads, who are not Uncle Toms. Talk about how the Republican Party needs to be a better job of showcasing honorees like you and others all across the country.
Well, I mean, it's just a simple fact. If the party intends to expand and to grow, you've got to allow the light to shine on the Blacks within the party. You know, when Alabama switched from Democrat to Republican, I had been in the party probably over 10, 12 years at that time, and I was on the steering committee. And at our annual meeting, I walked into a room of 500 new executive members for the state party, and I told them the history of the Republican Party. The Republican Party had just taken control of the Alabama House, and they were advertising the fact that for the first time in 130 years, Republicans control the Alabama House. And I happened to have found a picture of the Alabama House 130 years ago, and I told them, this is our party. I want to welcome all of you to our party. And then I went on to tell them the history of, shortly after the Civil War and during the Reconstruction period up into the early 1900s, white Republicans were run out of the South or went underground, were afraid to show their faces. And the only way that the party stayed alive and active in the South was through Black involvement and Black support of the Republican Party. You can check the history of the Black State House representatives, the Black congressmen, and the Black senators who came out of the South during that period, all Republicans. And up into the around 1950, 1960, Blacks were predominantly members of the Republican Party. It was amazing to me how the media and I call it the government schools were able to just wipe out our story. And they started Black History Month with 1963. And when we were in school and following Carter Woodson and getting the true history of the broad base of African contributions in the sciences and the mathematics, in literature, across the board, all of that was suppressed. And there was no way for our children who were in the public school system to get that information. And we were non-existent to the media. Anything we had to say somehow never found its way into print or even onto the local radio stations. And one of the points that I made earlier was that after I had graduated college, gone off to work in New York and Atlanta for about 10 years, come back to Birmingham, my first time going to vote, if you lived in the Black community, there was only one machine, and it was the Democratic Party ballot. I walked in, I looked at the top of the ballot, and there was a white rooster symbol at the top of the ballot. I walked out of the booth, went over to the table, and I said, well, where's the donkey? The lady said, what? I said, you've got a white rooster at the top of the ballot. The white rooster, I know that they've removed the ribbon, but they used to have a ribbon running between the leg that said the White Supremacist Party. But they still had the white rooster at the top of the ballot. And she looked lost. I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't vote for anybody running on the white supremacist ballot. And eventually had to write a letter to the editor of the Birmingham Post-Herald, that was when Birmingham had 2 newspapers, pointing out that they were forcing black people to vote under the white supremacy party banner. And I needed to know why they didn't put the donkey up there. I used another term, but why they didn't put the donkey up on the ballot. And I queried black folk who had run and got elected to office running under the banner of the white supremacist party. So immediately then all the forces necessary to try to silence me or block me or make me the villain in this whole mess, began to work. And it was amazing and shocking to me that how angry black Democrats were with me because I simply pointed it out. You're voting under the white supremacist banner and you calling yourself voting Democrats. And if that is the symbol for the Democratic Party, how in the world, with all the stuff that we've gone through, could you as educated men and women walk in and vote under that? And I never really understood. And there was some people who would say that when the Voting Rights Act was passed, that Johnson and the Southern Democrats came to an understanding. And the Southern Democrats simply said, well, if we are going to allow them to vote, then they have to vote Democrat. In all the years that I had grown up and we had developed in this country, we were obligated to Mr. Lincoln for our emancipation, and we stayed loyal to him up until that point. And after 1965, we sort of gone off the deep end.
Let me ask you